10 seconds. All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of, it's funny. I think we're calling this Tech Talks, but then there's like this audience owned concept in the background. So anyway, we're going to be thinking about that. I know there's a little bit of confusion about the episode numbering, but whatever. We're here chatting live, and the goal is to just chat about current events, technology. There's folks hanging out in the background that I'm going to bring in just here in a second. The run of show, we usually spend the first 10, 15 minutes just talking about something I think is interesting, some historical context. Part of the goal of what I'm doing here is trying to figure out how to connect historical context with things that are happening in the real world, and also to have group conversations with folks that I think are smart people, friends in my local network, in my community, people from the local tech community, people from the web design world, etc., and just kind of discuss things that are trending and happening in the real world. So that's what we're here to do. Let me cut to the screen here, and we're going to run through. Let me give this one more layer of zoom. Cool. Okay, so talking points today, we're going to be talking about property rights. And last week we talked a little bit about digital violence. Anyway, we're going to walk through how those kind of dots connect. And then I think as we move forward, we may have less of this structure at the beginning and just get right into sharing some links and current events. But anyway, total work in progress here. Why property rights are fundamental to a free society is where we're going to start the conversation. How do you own something digitally? So these are going to be our talking points for the night. How do you own something digitally? Everything is a competition for our attention. So basically everything we see around us in the modern world is competing for our attention. And then exploring the incentives around online publishing, as well as community being our only real mechanism for scalable trust. So like I mentioned last week, we talked about, where did that go? Oh, hang on one second. I got to refresh this. I have the notes didn't refresh properly. Okay, maybe I lied. Property rights as a fundamental to a free society. John Locke, again, one of the things I do is like try to tie things into historical context. John Locke is a English philosopher, and he argued that fundamental natural rights of individuals are life, liberty, and property, which may sound like something you've heard before, and we're going to talk about that. This is something that comes up often with me. But property to him didn't mean land, goods, or wealth only. They included that, but it didn't mean only that. And he's kind of responsible for a lot of what we look at right now as like liberal society, right? Liberal democracy, kind of the role of government in our lives. And I think it's important because a lot of folks don't really like think about these things. So I think it's important sometimes to look back contextually and understand kind of how we got to where we are, right? And so one of his primary tenets was that humans are free and equal, governed by natural law, which in his mind was reason. There's no government yet involved here. This is just individuals with inherent rights. And so this is just like you're born, there's no rules, there's no society, there's no structure. This is just, by nature, this is where we're at. And then he developed the concept of natural rights, which is life, liberty, and property are inalienable. This means that these are not granted by a government. They're pre-political. This means that regardless of what happens, these are yours. You have these things. These are your natural born rights just by having life. Then property is something that you own yourself. You own your labor. This is the idea we talked about before that this is my face. You shouldn't be able to punch my face. So we establish laws that kind of define this. This is kind of the construct with that comes to life. So we have life, liberty, and property as inalienable rights. They're not granted by government. They're pre-political. You own yourself. You own your labor. You own the fruits of that labor, which means you can kind of work in this world and build things. And, with your time, you gain stuff. There's a social contract. So people consent to the form of government only to protect those natural rights. So basically, this is what we give government the right to do. And we talked a little bit about this as the last episode because this relates to political violence. A lot of what we use violence for is to defend these property rights. And so there's a connectivity here between, there's an arc developing in the last couple weeks if you've missed any of this. And then limited government. Government is a fiduciary trust. Break that trust, i.e. become tyrannical, and the people have a right to revolt. This is one of Locke's core tenets. And then the separation of powers laid the groundwork for the legislative and executive branches being separate, influences Montesquieu and the U.S. Constitution. Why is that important? Because, we all know that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is part of the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Jefferson was building on Locke's learning as they founded the premise of this country, but they understood that you should be able to pursue happiness, right? So property at some level is the things we own, but it's also our time. It's the things we do with our time. It's what we are able to pursue in this world. This is the idea of being free, and why America is free is because you should be able to go pursue whatever you want. And those things that make you happy are kind of what make us unique, right? Pursuing your passion, pursuing an entrepreneurial project, pursuing something that drives you, and motivates you is kind of the core tenet of happiness. And so you should have the ability to live and not be worried about somebody killing you. You should have liberty, which means, again, that you should be able to roam free and do the things in the world that, kind of you desire to without infringing on somebody else's right. And then you should have the pursuit to kind of do what you want with that. But like we said, how do you own something digitally? So there's kind of a handful of ways you can own something digitally. You can possess the item, but how do you prevent duplicates, right? Especially on a digital scale. So imagine I have a video. If I give somebody else a copy of that video, now they have a copy. But if I publish this to Instagram, then there's also a copy on Instagram, and now they own a copy as well. So then you develop legally recognized ownership and enforcement, but this doesn't prevent privacy, right? People pirate videos and all sorts of stuff all the time. And then you have tech-based trustless solutions to enforce digital ownership. This is the idea of Bitcoin, blockchain, et cetera. These are things that are evolving right now. We're trying to figure out, can you own something digitally? And then can you protect that thing digitally? And then does that need a central authority? Typically, to enforce something, you need a court, you need a state, you need some kind of law, you need some kind of centralized force to say, hey, this person owns this thing, therefore we're going to enforce that with force, or we're going to send the cops to take this from you, or again, lots of things that can happen, but there's a centralized force. Can you do that in a decentralized way? And this is a question I think that we're starting to ask more and more in our current society. So the incentives for online ownership sit at the intersection of trust and attention. I think this is why, obviously we've seen that most valuable companies on the planet are tech companies, and the currency they trade is measured in terabits of personal information that they store on each of us. But also the value of any currency is based on its scarcity, how stable it is, the purchasing power, et cetera, which are reliant on what people believe about it, which again is part of the media, the narrative, the story that we talked about that's required to organize anything, specifically violence, that we talked about in the last episode. And same thing is true for community. Safety, trust, respect, et cetera. They all depend on the perception and the ability of the network to execute, right? And so as you grow, you build trust. As you build a community, the message shares, hey, this is a safe place. You can build your house here. You can build your business here. You can, get married. You can let down your guard because you don't have to worry about the roaming villages that are coming to attack us. And we can build something bigger than you might be able to build for yourself if you were having to fend in, the wild and deal with, and I'm wondering if somebody could check the YouTube. I'm not sure I'm sending audio to YouTube. I just looked at my streaming. Okay, it might be. I just had it cropped a little bit. Okay, next slide. This means there's an all-out war for our attention. We've kind of seen this, social incentives and behavior at scale, sales channels and online commerce, more data is more insight. So we've talked about this. And I don't know how deep I want to get into this. I would like to record at some point this concept. And basically, this is a diagram of what I see as the digital modern publishing landscape and the incentives that power it. And I'm just going to run through real quick this quadrant, and maybe we'll refer to this back as we go through. But essentially, we have paid distribution on the left and then organic distribution on the right. And so you have distribution, or you could also think of attention on the horizontal axes here. And on the vertical axes, you have demand. So this is creators and consumers at the top, or create at the top and consumers at the bottom. And you basically have a mechanism where money, advertisers, distribution flows across this chart. And it's tough. I need to figure out how to make this interactive. It'd be cool to be able to draw and drag across this. Maybe I need to bring this into TL Draw and do Telestrator style. But essentially money in the top left corner flows through advertisers into these other vectors, right? So money flows from left to right and credibility flows from right to left. And you have organic distribution made by creators. And so if you can get organic distribution, well, you're an influencer, right? This is the idea behind an influencer. If you have a large audience and you can generate demand, if you can generate attention, well, then that gives you credibility, and you can pass that credibility down channel to publishers, right? And so publishers are on the left. These are the guys that own the infrastructure. And on the right, this is the audience. And if the creators own the audience, so if the creators are above the audience, they then earn trust with that audience. And this is represented in the bottom right corner. If you can generate organic reach and you're a creator and you have credibility and you have an audience, well, then you generate trust. And that's kind of the function of our modern world. Whether we want to debate if that's right or not, we can leave that for the conversation. But that's kind of how this all shakes out. And then on the left, you have publishers who try to aggregate power. They hold the relationship with the advertisers in a lot of instances. They are the ones who funnel the money into the creators. And across all factors of our modern world, there's like people plotting across this chart. And this has been something I've been thinking about for years that hopefully will come to life as part of this experiment here. But if you think about it, community is really our only real mechanism for scalable trust. And this goes all the way back to what we talked about last week with, again, starting to defend the local tribe and village is about community. We need community and we need a story to start defending our world at a larger scale. That leads to early barter and local commerce, right? And so this allows us to exchange freely and create marketplaces. And, I spend my time in the fields, getting wheat or whatever crop, and then you can, come and fix my house and we'll trade some of that. And then, leads to safe trade routes and interstate commerce, which leads to unification of currencies, which leads to reliable infrastructure. And now we're stepping into a world where that reliable infrastructure needs to be digital. And again, how do we experiment with communities to own, this infrastructure that we're trying to build, which is really the premise of these talks. And so this is the last chart I'm going to share here because I talk about this a lot, this atmosphere of the internet. And let's get a little abstract. Imagine in the background here, the blue layer is the earth, the crust of the earth. And then above it, you have this atmosphere layer. And so I see, on the internet, we have the infrastructure layer. You have the cloud, your CDNs, your security layers, all the kind of the back end server stuff. And then you have these platforms that build on top of that: web publishing, social media platforms, SMS and messaging platforms, email, paywalls. This is all the stuff we use to communicate. And that's where the platforms live. And this is kind of the earth of the internet, if you will, right? Like this is ground floor of the internet. And then on top of that, you have these ideas. You have shared interests, you have journalism and media, you have these small businesses and community networks, and you have kind of geography. People connect based on all of these things. So these are ideas, these are the stories, these are the, the layer in the middle. And then at the top, you have the people, individuals, families, friends, coworkers, et cetera. These are the people doing the living, right? And so the atmosphere, it gives life to us as humans, but on the internet, the life gives, value to the network. And on the right side of this graph, I have like a trust index. So at the top, you have more trust and more value on these first two columns. At the bottom, you have less trust and less value, right? So I'll go through these, right? And on the top, in the people networks, you have smaller audiences. It's decentralized. It's more organic, relationship-based. This is your network. This is your close peers. And as you get further away from that, you have these large audiences because they centralize the audience. They centralize the engagement. The incentives for them are totally different, once you scale out. Same thing here. More value, right? At the top of this network, when you're with your people, with your family, with your tribe, all the incentives are aligned. There's no need for advertising. There's no need for hyperbole. There's no need for clickbait. It's like in line with human psychological behavior. This is how you interact with your friends. This is how you build trust. This is like where you exchange value at scale. On a small level, but at scale, it's driven by advertising. The incentives are, more in line with exploiting privacy, and hyperbole reigns supreme. And this is where it gets flipped because the bottom of this has less trust and less value, but it earns more revenue. Whereas at the top of this, earns less revenue, but it has the most value and it creates the most trust. And so to me, that's like a value-based misalignment with what we talked about. Because again, we talked about this digital feudal state last week, that we don't own much of what we do on the internet. We own the attention layer of the internet, which is this atmosphere of the internet. Is where our attention goes, so flows the kind of the zeitgeist. And this is what everyone tries to capitalize on. It's this is what politicians try to capitalize on, viral news, media. Everyone's just trying to capitalize on this atmosphere and tap into the life of this internet, right? So it's more and more the future of the internet is moving towards this kind of social layer, this communication / connectivity layer, rather than the infrastructure, the software we're seeing. The software is being easier and easier to build. The infrastructure, the servers are getting cheaper and cheaper to maintain. What's becoming more and more valuable, and I actually have an interesting graphic to show about this, is the real human side, the connection, the curation side, the piece that is like meaningfully connected with the human layer. And so, in the spirit of the Declaration of Independence, we, the creators, in order to form a more perfect internet, need to start thinking about these things at a different scale. So with that being said, let's jump out to the Discord, folks. What's up, friends? I see you here in the background. What's up? I know I jumped through a lot there. I think, where do we get? Okay, just about 15 minutes again. So At least my timing is consistent. Whether it's effective or not, that's to be determined yet. The audience, I'm sure, will let us know over time whether these are worth people investing their time in. But let's open the conversation up now and think about digital ownership. I have some interesting clippings here, actually, that I can pull up. Where is this? That I want to talk about. This is a fun meme I found today, that if it requires the labor of others, it's not a human right. But this was the one, Supabase. This chart here is showing the growth in Supabase customers over the last handful of months, 6 months-ish, let's say, last quarter than the first 4 years. And that's a database platform. And so this is people owning their databases, right? A lot of, like, this is people vibe coding. This is people building things on the internet. Where did I see there was another? Oh, this is the one I was talking about before. Let me see if I can go full scale to this one, because this is showing what roles and what jobs are still being, we talked about this. Stanford just surveyed 1,500 workers and AI experts about which jobs AI will actually replace and automate. Turns out we've been building AI for the wrong jobs. Here's what they discovered. And so this is showing the types of jobs and how they're moving. And what we're seeing here is at the top, organizing, planning, and prioritizing work, training and teaching others, so communication and supervising peers and subordinates, like things that require this taste and human connection and kind of organizing abstract ideas in a way that the AI can't do yet, are going to be in need. They're in higher demand now as we go into this AI world. And this chart actually had a bunch of interesting graphics. I'm not going to go through it, but there was a bunch of interesting plots, this thing. Kind of plotting, where people want things to be automated versus where things are actually being automated, and where YC companies are targeting products, and just showing like some of the gaps. So again, we can chat about this, but I want to get into just saying hi to the folks here. So what's up? If anybody wants to, camera on, camera off, whatever you feel comfortable with, audio only is fine with me. Anybody got thoughts on the opening segment, digital ownership, kind of what's going on with the world right now, or just whatever you're thinking, feel free to jump in. Oop, what's up? Oh, dang. I had y'all muted that whole time, so I hope nobody was trying to say something. Okay, we're back. I got you guys off mute now.
What's up, Rummer? What's up, Colleen? How are you?
What's up, Daniel?
What's going on?
Chilling, man.
So the word taste really comes to mind. Tell people, like, what do you think about that? Like, are two people using the same platform to make something with different tastes going to have the same result?
I don't think you can have the same kind of taste. Right? Like, can two people have the same taste? I mean, they can have the same preferences, I think, but if you're talking about creating something, like, the odds of them getting to the same path is pretty slim in the creative space, visually at least. Hi, Emily.
Yeah, that's why I always think about, like, when people belittle AI or creators using AI, they're kind of negating the taste factor that, like, that creator has. Like, somebody with like a higher quality understanding of something, or they're going to output a different quality even with the same AI tool. And so it makes the AI tool, in my opinion, a little bit less valuable, and the human being a little bit more valuable. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things. I'm sorry, go ahead, Colleen.
Go ahead. No. All good.
No, I was just going to say, even here, what was it? They were talking about that most of the people in the survey were talking about having AI role-based support, so like most people are looking for supporting the role, not necessarily replacing their role. They're looking for it to enhance their skills, not, kind of replace the work. And one of the things that this survey talked about also is that folks are looking for the AI to do like a different part of what it's trying to do, right? Like right now, a lot of the AI tools are trying to automate the creating the content part of the process versus kind of the managing the workflow of the process. And most creators want help managing the workflows and doing the back end menial task, and they want to spend their time doing the creative task and the fun stuff. And I think that's, that'll be an interesting chasm to cross at some point. Colleen, what were you saying?
Oh, I was just going to say, just kind of a little bit to Daniel's point. One of the things that I thought was kind of interesting, Lovable did a hackathon this weekend where they made 3 different models available for use for free over the course of the weekend. So you could use Gemini, you could use stuff from OpenAI, or you could use stuff from Anthropic. And one of the things that I played around with was giving each of those tools basically the same prompt just to see what the output was. And there was such a wide divergence in terms of basically taste of just, asking for task A to be done. Now, I didn't put it through a ton of variations. Like those prompts weren't necessarily optimized for the strengths of each tool. So maybe if they were optimized a little bit more, we might have seen more divergence in terms of taste or in terms of look. But I think the person who's doing the controlling the knobs, they've got a thumb on the finger in terms of that taste aspect. But at the same time, if a tool isn't capable of doing X, Y, or Z, no matter how great your taste is, you may not still be able to get what you want.
Well, and taste is so subjective too, like there are design trends. There are, there are for sure rules of graphic design and design in general that I think should be followed in a lot of ways. But as you learn the rules, you learn also to break them. But it's so hard to tell somebody like this is bad design, especially as you see now, like all these trends making everything look the same. And so I think people are going to be breaking out of those trends. I don't know.
I don't know. I thought some of what I got out was bad design. So
yeah, for sure.
I think it's okay.
There's a lot of bad design. It's easy to have bad design. Yeah. Trying to bring it back to the audience stuff and the value of the group here. I keep thinking about like, could we create some kind of shared, I don't know. I keep thinking about like, and this is something I've thought about for years. It's like a lot of times you invest in like a company, right? You want to invest in like a startup, let's say, is the most common thing that people invest in. But what if you could just invest in like people or a community or a project, right? And like I keep thinking about this audience-owned umbrella. And like, could we go out and figure out a way to raise some money under the umbrella of building like this community-owned X? And the value of that was to bring dollars in revenue into this group to like empower the folks here. Like, I know, like I'm just looking at the group here, like there's so much talent in this room that, and I know I've spoken to a number of you about figuring out like, hey, how do we generate more leads for X? Or how do we, land more video clients? Or, whatever the task is. And so maybe instead of this abstract, like, let's build a media company, let's, clip things, like for sure. But what if we use this as like an accountability meeting and figured out like, hey, how can we actually drive some business out of this group? How can we, like figure out how to do something interesting that like goes beyond, just some curation thing. And, like that would be an interesting experiment. I don't know how, there's like lots of stuff to figure out, but we could probably go out to the crowd. And I thought about this, like imagine if I opened up and just said, hey, instead of investing in like a specific company, this one company I'm building, what if you could just invest in my future earnings? And I sold off 10% of like the holding company that is like Rymar and whatever other companies come out of that. And instead of it being like this thing that, again, a singular project, it's like one of these things is going to go, right? Like working on so many different things, like one of these things is going to go. And so I just wonder like what kind of interesting thing could we come together if we started thinking like a business association or a group that was focused on like driving business back into this thing, and then see what expands from there. Like we're live streaming this right now, but it doesn't have to be. This could just be like, hey, let's get together and talk about, tech and how we're navigating this world and how we're making a living and how we can, support folks in that regard too. So like, I'd be more open to, just thinking about those types of things. And as I was thinking about this digital ownership stuff and kind of the format of these first few episodes, again, I'm open to shifting and just figuring out like what works for everyone here and what we could generate the most value of. If we're going to spend our time in this, like we should own something interesting and, creatively, if we're going to invest some time into it, we might as well, do it aligned with the things we're already investing our time in outside of this. So anyway, just some thoughts. I'd be happy to hear. And then I see some stuff going in the comments. Were you sharing something relevant to passion fruit?
Yeah, just something that I saw today that just it kind of reminded me a little bit of what you're saying. I'm not very familiar with them, but as I was starting to take a look at it, it seemed like it was trying to provide evaluation on a creator so that brands can understand whether or not they want to put dollars behind a creator. At least that was sort of my quick takeaway.
Yes, like if you wanted to hire somebody, or let's see, introducing the Passion
I
Fruit
think it's
AI
more
campaign
like
strategist, powered by Google. Secret
so
sauce.
like
We've encoded.
sponsorship of your newsletter.
Yeah, we've encoded years of B2B creator marketing expertise into Gemini system prompts, creating an AI that thinks like the best senior marketers. Seems like maybe they're selling a product here, though, right? Scans hundreds of creators in a second, applies our proven playbooks automatically with custom prompts, delivers a personalized plan, forecasts performance instantly.
But
Yeah.
I think they kind of have this marketplace for brands to go and connect with creators. So
Got
if you're
it.
a brand and you're wanting to get your stuff in somebody's newsletter, whose newsletter potentially fits with?
Oh, so
with-
maybe they have like a marketplace, I see, for brands, for creators. Features, customers, pricing.
Hey Rymar, how many of us know about the advertising widget, and can you tell people a little bit about it? If not, and because that kind of reminds me of what you're talking about in a way.
Yeah, I had a problem with that. There was a security breach at Replit recently, and I got a notification about that, and it caused them to have to set some of the audience owned stuff. So it's actually down right now, and I'm trying to figure out how to get it back up.
What about just like the concept of it? I think is kind of cool. Maybe we could get on the same page, see if anyone has any thoughts on it.
Yeah, the idea is this. So part of this audience owned concept is the idea that we could build the largest or a large media like online presence, right? So lots of us have websites, and so I created this little widget that can basically go on any website. You can customize it to display whatever call to action you want. You can even customize it and blend it into your Webflow website. And then it tracks the performance of the site, the performance of the offer, the performance of the call to action. And so the idea would be that we could have this widget installed across, let's say, hundreds of websites or thousands of websites. You control the call to action on your end. But maybe every once in a while, somebody else from the network gets to put a call to action in your widget or gets to steal the attention of your network. Let's say they're launching a campaign or doing something interesting that relates to your audience. Maybe we could find a way to inject that in there. And so the idea is to create like the largest audience-owned advertising network that lives on the back of all these creator sites. So many of these online influencers and people who generate attention online are beholden to like a social platform to pay them for a piece or whatever platform's paying them. Imagine if they could somehow take advantage of the traffic they generate in an additional layer by kind of creating their own ad widget that could benefit their community. So I'm trying to think of good use cases. Like imagine
Do the Sarasota Tech one, like the directory. Like, let's say you have a business chamber or like a local community. Like, what if everybody in that directory was using the widget? That way, you don't have to pay Facebook ads or, Google ads or whatever. You could actually pay the network, who is, shared ownership with all of the other people on it to promote ads locally to all the people, in that community.
Yeah,
Right? Is that a good case?
Yeah, I think that's a great use case actually. Like imagine it's like a digital chamber of commerce idea. Every business has a blog. Every business is trying to figure out how to like stand out and build their presence in their local community to land more clients, et cetera. But they're all kind of blogging into their own little silos, kind of independently and alone. Imagine daisy chaining all those sites together, and when a community event goes out, you can support it across that entire network. Or when something cool is happening or when there's an offer, it goes across all those sites or all those pages or all that traffic. The problem is, getting the right kind of traffic and having, the size of the network. But yeah, those are the types of things that I think, we could experiment with, is figuring out like not just the tools, but like how do we, from a social construct, do interesting things here in the community. Hosting events. I mean, a lot of us could use, more work. I know lots of freelancers that are always looking for more projects. You know, folks have chatted with me about, plans of wanting to start their own thing or, go freelance or leave their jobs or whatever it is. So I've thought for years about, how can we support that? And I don't really know. But I do know there are organizations like that. There are things like a Chamber of Commerce. There are things like employee leasing organizations where as a business you can go and get benefits that you would never have access to with a small number of employees because they pool all of the employees as a larger group. And so you get buying power and kind of all sorts of stuff that, you might be able to benefit from having a group like that. So, yeah, I don't know. Anybody thoughts? All right. Yeah.
I guess one thought that popped to my one thought that popped to my mind while you were going through the slides earlier was kind of some of the stuff that we discussed, I guess, last week was a little bit about like the dead internet theory and just of if we're reaching a point where on social media, if it's bot talking to bot, that message is maybe not getting through. And so some of what you're talking about would be a way to counteract some of that.
Yeah, and more specifically, like on a localized level, like how many of us, Kat, like I know you're doing events and promoting stuff all the time. Like imagine if you had a local network to be able to blast this out to and say like, hey, all the cool kids are going to be over at this thing tonight, Like those are the things that I think about that, again, it's not about like, none of this is about reaching viral scale or having millions of views or having like, a video with 50,000 views. It's like, no, even if this video only gets 100 views, if it's the right people in a town, that's like amazing. Like that's the type of targeting you want to have. And I think we have that at our disposal, especially, locally or across our networks. And so, and then who could we wrap into that, right? How many other people do we know that could benefit from a system like that? So if we built some kind of mechanism that allowed us to have that, like that's something people would pay for access for. It would be a very interesting type of like, again, like I was thinking the other day, like the cans on the end of the phone, like what's that? Like are the cans on the end of a string, So it's kind of like that. It's like, hey, this isn't about viral scale, internet scale stuff. This is about like, I need to message the homies that, we're going to go kayaking and, this at the springs this weekend or something.
So is this like a pre-vetted platform? Oh my God, I can hear my echo. He's right behind me, folks.
Oh.
It's like echoing. So is this like a pre-vetted like platform where, you want to make a connection, you need a professional, like you need an event coordinator or you need this or you need that. Like it's like a network that you would be a part of to find professionals?
No, that exists. There's like lots of those. I don't think we need like another like service listing directory type of thing.
Okay.
I'm thinking more of like an active, communication channel or like an active, and I don't know if this is like, right? Like, do you reach them by email? Is it text? Like how do you actually engage folks? Sure, social media. But like one of my biggest gripes is like, I always find out about cool events after they happen because everyone posts the pictures of it, So like, what's the incentive? How do you incentivize folks to, get that same type of activity ahead of time, incentivize them to do that? And that becomes like, again, crowd-based advertising. It's like audience-based advertising that's valuable because, you're going to get that organic shares. Like imagine some kind of asset goes into a bucket. This bucket's available for anyone to kind of come and look and say, oh, hey, here's 5 things in this bucket. This one is interesting to me. I'll share that. And maybe I can be rewarded because I shared that thing. So it's not like you're reposting our thing. It's like you're going onto your channel, whatever channel you want, any platform you want to distribute on. You take this nugget of information that we said, hey, it's probably valuable to XYZ network and help us distribute it. And that's where that widget comes in a little bit, is then we can kind of track the performance of that thing that you share and try to figure out how to then attribute value back to an individual, right? Like there's some complexities here for sure to be figured out, but those are the types of things that I think get interesting as it relates to digital ownership. Like how do we build that network? Like if all of us today, the 8 of us that are here committed to building that, and then tomorrow it was 12, and 24 and then a couple hundred, you know, like how many do you need to, you know, to distribute this type of thing? And then for sure it becomes about curation, because once you get to a certain size, then it's like, here's the fire hose again, you know? But that's why I think these things become like verticals, right? So like there could be a Sarasota vertical, or there may be many verticals. Like Sarasota Tech could be one vertical in Sarasota. There might be a Sarasota Underground and a Sarasota Singles and a Sarasota, you know, Boaters Club and whatever, right? Like, and so there could be like an infinite level of branching inside of these things. Reddit does this. Obviously, lots of social networks and forums do this. But again, I'm not talking about hard digital channels. I'm talking about like cuckoo, you know, like the birds do when it's like, or the dogs, like, well, you know, when somebody come to the neighborhood, like that's one of the things that you live in a kind of a hood neighborhood. This is a real thing, right? And one of the reasons they have like lots of dogs in the backyards is like to warn of like, hey, somebody's around, somebody's creeping, you know, so the dogs start barking. And birds do this, like lots of things. So like, how can we create a little canary network, a little like sharing network that it's like, this isn't just every time you post or you want to take a picture of your food, go to Instagram. This is like, I need the support of my people for this thing. I need you all right now to like help me get this out. You know, how do we do that?
I think it's got to be some form of aggregation. It's got to be listening on a lot of different channels and on a lot of different platforms and plugged into like multimodal, like messaging, social. I think you can use like data scrapers for different platforms, man. And then if you can compile it and then have it, you know, present that in a nice little wrapper, you know, maybe like old school RSS style where it's like, here's the little thing that's popping, or on a website that has all of these different channels brought in from different places. I'm using this new AI called Manus. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but it's agentic. And I'm having it do tasks, and I schedule the tasks to happen at certain times. So you could have it go out and see what's new at these different sources at different times, so that it's pulling in this information and it's keeping it up to date. I think it's there's a lot that you can do with it to try and source it and aggregate it. And I think that if you have enough people along with the same goal to try and make things happen, it's far more possible than one person trying to do it themselves.
Yeah. And that's why I think it like, I mean, that's what we've come back to always. It's like you need a bunch of people kind of being these filters and taking that, you know, like somebody's interested in the nonprofit stuff, somebody's interested in the technology stuff, somebody's interested in social life, etc. And, you know, they're already got their finger on the pulse. How do you give them a home that rewards them for that in a meaningful way? This is what, like, again, a media company used to do. But you can't, like, it can't be the responsibility of the platform. It can't be like a thing that somebody has to manually control, like you said. It has to be a thing that kind of folks actively like, and that's where it becomes difficult, because how do you then, like, what's the platform for everyone to be on that's easy for them to share to, that's not just a social network, you know, like, and that's always the problem, is like getting folks to adopt or sign up or show up. You know, like that's the hardest thing. And then not only that, but then how do you get them to keep doing the thing? So it has to be like so simple, you know, for folks. So that's why I wonder, like, what's the thing? Like, how do we do? It's like, you know, you send a text, somebody else sends a text, you know, that gets, there's like this grapevine thing that kind of happens. And I'm just wondering, how do you create something like that, and maybe it's just we benefit from, like, you know, maybe this isn't like, you know, let's build the next Facebook. It's like, let's build something cool so that when something's happening amongst all of us, that we don't miss it, or that, you know, we can help promote, you know, an event. And sometimes that's not just like, I don't know.
Yeah. Sounds like a private, you know, tech thread or something that has moderation built in, and that you can, I don't know how you keep it without it getting it spammed. And then you have it grow so big that everybody's posting at the same time, and then people start to mute that because there's too much chatter, and then the value goes away.
Yeah, so I see it as like, there's probably two layers. There's like the social layer. There's everything that happens. This is the Facebook and the Instagrams and whatever, and like all the, you know, and then there's probably like this, whether it's the influence layer or the mover and shaker layer or the whatever, right? It's the curator layer. And then there's that distribution layer that goes on the surface of that. And so those curators kind of funnel and find those things. We give them some kind of tool to like pull that up into some other layer. And then, you know, there's folks can come and pick and say like, oh, hey, I can share X, or, you know, because at the end of the day, you don't need that many people, especially for like a small location. You know, if you had 5 or 10 people working across Sarasota, you could basically put your finger on everything that's happening in this town, you know? Same thing with like,
I wonder if there's.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say same thing with like an industry, right? Like the Webflow industry or the web design industry, you know, a couple hundred people and you've got your finger on the pulse of an entire industry. And I bet that goes down the chain for most everything. You know, there's a small group of, and those are the folks. You also have to appeal to the folks that don't necessarily have like already the massive audiences, because they don't need our help. You know, it's like the aggregator of the medium-sized audiences, right? It's like the folks, and we don't want the people with no audience either, because like you don't bring any value to the network, you know, other than like volume. And so you kind of want, like, this is kind of home for that middle, you know, it's like you've got a little bit of traction, you've got a little bit of experience, you're already doing some stuff, you're already actively posting stuff online, you'll probably already have a website, you're kind of already thinking about these things, but you haven't really broken out yet. And, you know, almost like think about what BNI is, like these Business Networking International, these like groups that just get together to share like business referrals. You know, it's like kind of creating a group like that, where it's like sharing digital things or, you know, meaningful stuff that, and it's not even sharing it to your social. It's like, hey, put it in a bucket that we can then take that and put it out to the world in a way that they can search it as they see fit, you know, because it's not even like, hey, somebody wants me to share X, Y, and Z. And it's like, well, I don't really have that audience. Okay, but send it in this pot because amongst us, we have that audience, you know? And so maybe it's not relevant for me, but I know it's high value. And so put it in the pot over here. And then Emily can be like, oh, that's exactly what I needed. And again, it's not relevant for me, but she knows somebody that is relevant for. And that's the value of a network. That's like, you know, when you go to a networking event and you meet somebody and they're like, oh, I'm looking for XYZ. And you're like, I know that person, bought it across the room. And you go make that connection. Like, that's the value of a network. And no social media like does that. Like nothing online creates that type of thing. It's like, I can share it. Sure. You know, my aunt, my mom, my friend, whatever shares my video, but like, that's not really who I need. You know, I need like somebody who can reach my people. That's why I pay Facebook to advertise to a specific audience. But, you know, that's expensive. And how do I compete against people with big advertising bucks? You know, you call right? What do you call that? The cuckoo network. That's probably not the right name, but cuckoo, you know, you got to send out the cat call. Yeah. Send out the bat signal.
What's cool is to give some people like a stage to talk about like what they're good at, what their profession is, like the problem they solve, like kind of like give them a little TED talk and feature a person every week or every whatever. And they're pretty much kind of advertising themselves and saying, hello, here I am. This is what I do. Like create like a user profile about them by doing that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just an idea I just had.
I like that. And I'm happy to do some of that here. Like, I think we could for sure spend, you know, a chunk of this Tuesday thing recording some of that. Even if it's like a higher quality, you know, like we talked about, it doesn't need to be in Discord here. We talked, you know, we shared some in that group chat the other day about tools we could use for that. So, yeah, like that. Come share yourself, like come present something that's interesting to you. You know, like that's kind of the premise here. And I'm hoping to seed that by, it's like, hey, I'll present to start, but you know, maybe somebody reaches out and says, hey, I want to present to start. Okay, cool. You know, like let's figure that out. And that's why I think like we could create a stage that is not just about that digital exposure, but it's like, how do you amplify that on the back end? Because then we can tie that into all the other things we're doing, you know?
Does everybody know the Sarasota Tech website? And are you guys all on it?
Yeah, I think you're the only one that's not here in Sarasota in this group, and Colleen's in Naples, and then Chris, I don't believe is. Maybe he is.
I was just talking to Ramor about maybe duplicating it for Miami, because I feel like it's such a good you know, way to start bringing that information together, and especially connecting it with like real life events and real life community. I think is, you know, maybe that little template you got going is like half of the thing that you need, you know, to do what we're talking about.
Well, and I'd like to tie into the Sarasota Tech stuff more, My concern is, like the goal for part of, this network would be to help folks make money and to kind of not lock this up. But Sarasota Tech is a nonprofit. It's a 501c6. We actually just got our official filing from the state today, or from the federal government today, from the IRS. So that was cool. And, we have plans, but that's kind of separate from this. I think at some point the paths will merge, but I'd like to kind of explore this, in this setting, and then figure out how do we, that it's there. The audience is there. That community is there for us for sure to tap into. And that asset, Daniel, is not owned by Sarasota Tech. That's owned by me. So yeah, we could for sure that, or, any other thing we want to take for you. What's that?
When am I going to get that clonable?
I told you it's already available on Replit to remix right now. Like if you wanted to go, you could go clone it right now if you want.
All right, cool. Yeah, I'm going to work on that. I just love the concept. I think it's really cool.
Yeah. Daniel's been stealing my clonables since 2017, by the way.
Probably since like 2015.
That's funny. Yeah, for those who don't know what a clonable is in Webflow, you can just let somebody copy the thing you built, and so you can make something clonable. And for a long time in the early Webflow days, those clonables was like, where everybody went to learn who was doing what in that industry. And yeah, I have a couple clonables that still get cloned today. I still 1 or 2 people a day clone a website, maybe more.
I was just surprised people still use Webflow now. They've just really screwed their base over, man. It just kind of pisses me off. Got some salt in my wounds.
Welcome to the club.
I know.
Yeah.
You're not alone. Yeah, I love the idea. I'm in Washington State, but yeah, I'm gonna have to head off. But it's good chat and idea. And love to learn more as it kind of grows.
Yeah, all good, no sweat. Thanks for hanging, and I feel like we've crossed paths. I can't put my finger on it, but your name obviously is ringing a bell with me.
Yeah, we're connected on LinkedIn. It's been a while. I was really into Webflow a few years ago, but
yeah. That's a very common story too. Poor Webflow. What a amazing potential they had. Not to dismiss them, they're still going to be majorly relevant in the world of web design, but in the way like Salesforce is, not the way Apple is. They could have been the Apple of web design, and I guess they still will be that at a certain extent, but we don't have to dig into old wounds. I'll start crying. What's up?
What's been coming to mind for me of like, as you're talking about all the community and where you opened with like the atmosphere piece around audience, what's really been going through my head is the generosity in the community, right? For me, it starts with that, what am I bringing? What can I give people? Rather than the like monetization of what can I make off of it. And that when we give to the community and when we give our time, we give our knowledge, we give our expertise, we give, the support to each other in this space. That I think is where the power of the community comes to then eventually be able to get to the monetization.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what's been going through my mind, because, you started with the idea of attention, and right, for me to get attention versus all of us to get attention is different. And then when I generously share that attention, or you share that attention, even what you're doing right now, right? You created this attention space and all of us are now in it in some way. I feel like the word generosity just keeps going through my mind of the more generous I am, the more it's going to help all of us. And that, a rising tide raises all boats.
Yeah.
So that's what's been going through my mind as we're talking about the community pieces.
Yeah. And I don't imagine if there's any real money coming from this, that it will be like a quick endeavor. Like the goal is not like this is going to be some kind of get rich quick overnight scheme for anybody. I just know that if we are effective at doing things at any kind of scale, that like, revenue is typically a byproduct of that. And we're all, like creative people that sell our time either to a company or, as a freelancer or something like that. And so I also know that like lots of folks are looking to navigate the world that a lot of us are in tune with, you know, and so like people will start to look for ways to, you know, not extract value, but to like transact, I guess would be the right way to do it, you know, to say like, hey, you guys have connections and things and people and services that we value. And, you know, like maybe we can play matchmaker for those at some level. Again, even if it's like, I don't know, you know, like we never thought the Sarasota Tech thing was going to become as big as it did, you know, like doing tech meetup stuff. And I wonder, you know, could there be a group like that for social things or for music stuff or, you know, again, for other little channels? There's got to be people in town that are doing things that could just use a little bit of a boost. And if we found ways to, again, find synergies across that. And I don't know if that requires us to meet every week at a certain time or to record these clips, but yeah, it seems like good accountability to just, you know, come in and say like, hey, here's what I'm looking for, and invite somebody back, right? That's one of the things is like invite somebody in to say, hey, I don't know that I have like a video to share or an article to share, but I have a homie who's doing X that, you know, has an interesting story or is building something cool that, you know, have them come and share what they're building. And maybe we clip that up and publish that. And maybe the clips are not, you know, I don't know. We own the Sarasota Underground website. I'm sure we could get things published on, you know, the tech website. There's lots of different places we could start publishing this stuff. That again, over time may not be, it's not going to be a big hit at first, but 3 months from now, when we have 20 interviews up there and we're profiling the most creative people in Sarasota, or the most interesting people that, you know, are doing stuff outside of Sarasota that live in Sarasota, or maybe it's just the Southwest Florida region, or, you know, who knows, it starts expanding. So like that would be an interesting thing too. And then, you know, Tyler, we talked about maybe scooping folks for interviews in person. Yeah, I don't know. That's go ahead, Emily.
No, I was just going to say, and maybe like if I sort of take it back to where we started with like the digital ownership piece, right? And the AI piece and that complexity, when I think about like the ownership piece, you know, it's also kind of acknowledging and giving credit for people with what they bring, right? So it's not just about like, if I'm again, kind of going with the generosity piece of, I want to give to this group, I want to add value, like I want to be a participant in this community and in this space. I'm not worried about that ownership piece and like, how do we create the community that kind of protects that ownership and protects it for acknowledging that, you know, Tyler said this or Reimar said this or I said this, because it's not, I'm not trying to claim it, but it's sort of giving that acknowledgement and that credit in the ecosystem and space. I think there's a lot of online communities that do that I think there's a power in that ownership component.
Yeah, and the reason I think the ownership is important is because you want people to have pride in whatever we build and in the output of the thing we do. And if there's no stake in that, you know, then people start perverting it or start bastardizing it or, you know, bringing things that I don't think, you know, really add value. So that's the other concern, is like making sure the incentives stay aligned. But I'm of the mindset that like we could go raise $500,000 to like do this thing right, or $1 million or whatever. Like I think amongst us, we have the talent and the skill set to like put together a story enough to go raise a round of, even if it's just friends and family and local connections, I bet we could get a few $100,000 to like really put some emphasis on that. And by that, I mean, bring in real people to do video, like put people to work and like create content, turn this into a proper machine that like harnesses the attention of a community in a meaningful way, you know? And like we build a case study for what like real local media could be, powered by the community itself, powered at the ground level, you know, again, a grassroots distribution chain that's like relevant to a localized network. And if that thing scales, that's a system that goes into any city. You know, that's infrastructure that you could scale into any city, any chamber of commerce, any, you know, business industry association would be happy to have that type of tech. And I've been looking at the technology that powers a lot of those systems, and it's absolute trash. Like a lot of those membership systems for groups like chambers of commerce or in large industry associations, they're using outdated, corny software or some custom built thing that, served their group 8 years ago, but lots of things have changed since they built that type of thing. So I don't know. I just think there's a big opportunity here, especially as like everyone starts going hard into tech and automated and blah, blah, blah. There's going to be such a big rush to real, in-person, meaningful connections, events, that type of thing that, I don't know.
So what about remixing some of these ideas? So Kat had mentioned about kind of doing having someone come in and kind of do this is who I am, this is what I do. You start there. You mentioned about, you find out about events after the fact. As part of doing a profile, it's maybe over the course of 4 weeks, we'd like you to do a drop of here's the 5 things that you need to know about X this week. So it's kind of a short-term temporal commitment, see how that goes. And then, maybe that renews on a month by month or quarter by quarter basis. That's then content that goes on a site, a little bit of generosity in terms of sharing knowledge.
The big concern for me comes in creating something that like has to be managed by like a single person to succeed, right? It kind of has to be, and what I mean by that is like, if it requires somebody hunting down folks to interview every week and booking them and, creating outlines and answering questions and dealing with, then it becomes more difficult to pull off versus creating a stage like we're doing and just saying, hey, we're going to like once a week have this platform and whoever can show up, bring somebody interesting, bring an event, bring whatever. And you start just telling folks like, hey, if you want, this is going to go out and we get then some kind of publication or syndication thing that shoots these out as shorts. Like right now, from the first 2 episodes, I have about 20 shorts that are what I consider evergreen. And by that, I mean like I can publish them whenever and they'll still be relevant. So some of this stuff I think will be less evergreen than others. But I think that could be a nice workflow for figuring out like people come in, we talk about something, we hype about something, we introduce somebody, they share. Actually, that Rick guy from Ringling at the first episode, like I got a couple really nice clips of him talking about some of the stuff he's doing in AI and the Anthropic collaboration and Ringling, blah, blah, blah. So I think those types of things would be pretty easy for us to bring, somebody interesting in to teach us something, to show off something, a video they just published, a project they just did, a website they just launched for somebody. Yeah, an open mic for business, exactly. Yes. And that could be something that maybe once a quarter we come offline and we do something really cool where we have a big showcase, or maybe that's where we partner with the Sarasota Tech stuff where, we want to do some big in-person things or, because then this offline thing, that's when it becomes real, I like that. And we've played with open mic stuff a couple times, Colleen, but I just keep thinking that, hey, an open mic, mostly it's like the mic is just there, people show up and they sign up to go on stage. There's not a lot of planning ahead of time. And that's kind of what I want to create. Even these last handful of episodes where it's like a theme and then a topic, I wanted to get some of those narrative arcs to tell the story. But I think moving forward, it could just be that. We don't need to spend the first 10 or 15 minutes doing that. It could just be, all right, sign up. You get 5 minutes. It's going to be a total wild card. We don't know who's going to show up. And maybe like late night at the Apollo, we can like shoot people off the stage if they get a little crazy or something. But yeah.
I think that could be really colorful and enjoyable and exciting because you don't know what's going to happen. I think that's the draw for me.
Yeah. Okay. I like the idea of open mic. The other question becomes, obviously I like the idea of meeting weekly as a cadence. But that open mic, would that be a weekly thing? Would that be like, would this essentially become that open mic on Tuesday nights? Or would we find a different time for that? Like, what do we think would be the play for that? The other thing is sometimes these, if it's too frequent, you lose the impact of it, which for sure we've seen, like the first event of this had 20-ish people. And last week we had 8, and I think we're 7 or 8 today, which is good. I think this is probably the right size for that. But for these things, we might want, a little bit more bang for the buck.
I think just from past experience with having done the show and tells, I think if they're too frequent, there's just not enough good content.
Right. Right.
So, I mean, maybe as the size of the group grows, that dynamic starts to change. But I would say initially,
Yeah, and there's only so many times we're going to want to hear about, our own stuff. Cycle through the same folks,
I think there's probably also like a little bit of an opportunity for incubation and like feedback and that conversation amongst folks if you get that going from an open mic, right? That here are my questions, Emily. Here's what what you shared. Here's what I'm curious about, what I would like to know, that then becomes meaningful and useful for whoever's sharing.
Yeah.
To kind of get that quick hit.
Yeah, one thing that's interesting, there's this group doing this thing called 10 by 10s here in town. And I don't know if you guys have seen that type of thing before, but basically it's like, I think it's like 10 minutes, 10 slides or something like that. And you basically get 10 minutes to tell a story. They have like 5 people come, and that's the format. So like nobody's thinking about questions. You can ask questions after if the person leaves time. Actually, I don't remember in that format if there was Q&A from the crowd, but I can imagine this format. You need to say, hey, you get 5 minutes. Stage is yours. Tell us about your business. Tell us about a project. Tell us whatever. Like, you get the stage. We start a clock. They can spiel if they kind of stutter a little bit. Maybe, I'm good at prompting things, or folks here can ask a question or something. And then maybe we grill them. So maybe they get a couple minutes for Q&A after. And we do 4 or 5 people. That'd be, probably enough to fill a whole hour between a little bit of opening and closing, and filling in the blanks with questions and stuff like that. I also, one thing I've been thinking of is, one thing I'm probably going to do in the next couple weeks is a vibe coding for small business workshop. So like bring, as a small business, like maybe having them submit, hey, what do you need? Like, what tech solutions do you need? And we build it right there and just give them a product at the end of the thing or something. Let's solve a real problem with technology in the course of 2 hours. You're going to come in with a business problem. We're going to maybe spend some time vetting, it ahead of time or whatever, but maybe that's part of it, where we look at it and we diagnose like, okay, this is a good problem to solve here. And, we may need to queue that up a little bit, but I was thinking that would be a great showcase for how businesses can use AI in the stack, and also show off a little bit of skills, teach people some stuff.
that sounds really cool.
Yeah, little workshops,
Really cool.
so like I like the open mic and workshopy type stuff. Kat's giving us the backstage on Tyler's got this nice light over here, and Kat's giving us the over the shoulder the lighting. Nice.
He spends a lot of time setting up.
Yeah. And then he totally forgot about the audio.
And I like the idea of workshops too, by the way. I think that'll attract some attention too, because people want to learn, people want to like do hands-on. Yeah.
Yeah, imagine a little photo editing session, a little video editing session, a little making music automated session. Emily, like a little coaching set. Like I could see, yeah, everyone brings their skills to the table, and we just start doing, and we just have a calendar that like, and that's the,
Yeah, maybe like Skills Sunday or Skills Saturday and Open Mic Tuesday or Open Mic Monday. I don't know. You can have a ring to it.
yeah. Sunday sessions. Don't fuck with Sunday dinner, right though, Emily? You guys don't know this, but we have, and this is honestly, so Emily and I have been talking about doing stuff in some capacity for a while. She started hosting these little dinners at her place. How long ago was it, Emily? Over a year, right?
Over a year, like last April.
Started just hosting these dinners at her house, and I won't say it's every weekend, but it's pretty close to every weekend. She hosts a bunch of random strays from around town, around the apartment building, and folks and we just get together for like a little Sunday dinner. And it's one of the most wholesome things that I've done in the last 20 years of my life since I moved out of home, you know, and had like dinners with my actual family on a regular basis, you know, just having like this little bit of community of we get to know each other. We share a little bit of like what's going on in our lives. A little bit of, you know, dating stuff comes out, life topics, whatever. Like we play games. There's one of the ladies brings her daughter. How old's Riley? Like 12?
8.
8. Okay.
8.
8 going on
Yeah.
20. She's so smart.
Yeah.
And yeah, and we eat and we play games and we had a pajama party the other day. And so there's just so much value to be had in these little community connections that even, and you know, again, a lot of us are geographically connected, but I don't think this network has to just be local. But there's so much power in doing stuff like this locally. So anyway, yeah, for whatever that's worth, I think this is what's our action items. Let's spend 2 minutes thinking about like what action items are we gonna take so that next Tuesday we're coming to the table like set up. What assets do we need? Do we need a shared calendar? You know, what's the best way to kind of organize this? I did create a hub for like notes, spaghetti and meatballs. That's right, every week, and you wouldn't believe it, but I bring the salad.
I'm Mars' salad guy.
That's right. Somebody does the dishes, you know, like people bring like if it's
Somebody's
somebody's
got their roles.
if somebody's got a birthday, somebody's remembering their birthday card. It's like it's like a family of friends. Super cool.
What day is it?
That dinner,
Yeah.
Sundays.
Sunday dinner. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So we can't do
Sunday
Sundays,
dinner.
but any other night or day or you know time for this type of thing is in play. I also think this could be a really cool in-person event. You know, this would be an amazing in-person event actually. You know, like a little business showcase.
Shark Tank. Local.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rymar, remember you used to do those events where people would go.
It's a little
I
creative
remember I
salons.
went. Is that what it was?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a really nice event because people were doing like poetry, then some people were like displaying their 3D printing. They were building like sculpture or
Yeah.
furniture. I thought that was really cool to see in person. Yeah, I think in person is always going to be a lot of fun to see everyone there. But I would say it would
In
be
person
good
just adds a
to-
lot of logistics, you know,
Yeah,
especially
but it would be
if
good
a
to
group
know,
is
like.
good.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just I'm adding excuses ahead of time for why I don't want to do more in-person events. But no, I'm kidding.
Yeah, they're a lot. They're a lot. Yeah.
Go ahead. What were you saying though?
Keeping track with everyone, like when we're not together, you know, like so we can build some anticipation is going to be very important. So, yeah, still, how do we bridge that time, that silence time, you know?
Well, and that's what I mean. Like, we probably need to have some regular cadence of. I think I'm going to keep showing up on Tuesdays at 7 for this thing, you know, and as often as people can show up. The question I have is like, what's the best way for us to communicate? We have a little group chat going. So do I invite, you know, the folks in this group, into that group chat that are not there yet? And, you know, we just, you know, maybe invite somebody else. Do we pick a date and say, hey, let's shoot for, you know, like in my experience, the best way to light a fire under something like this is to have a deadline and just say, okay, on X date, we're going to do this and we're going to host our first, you know, business show and tell. So that may be a thing. Maybe next week we think about, you know, coordinating this or spending our time planning that. But yeah, the communications in between and like actually doing the work. Like a lot of times what happens is folks want to show up to these things and then between the episodes when the camera's off, then folks like don't do shit and then they show up at the next one. And, you know, maybe one or two people actually did their work. So, that's the biggest thing is like, you know, what do we want to commit to? But I love the idea of even like Emily, you know, I'm not trying to invite the world to your dinners, but like imagine little progressive dinners at like a restaurant or two, you know, where we start here and have an appetizer, we go over here and have the meal, and then over here we're having ice cream and people can buy a ticket and it's, you know, X dollars, you buy the ticket and we just all show up and have a good time and nobody's got to cook and clean, you know? So like, even if we're just organizing those types of things, yeah, I think it could be super cool. And again, There's a lot of overlap. There's the Sarasota Underground umbrella that's sitting on a shelf. That's a brand that could be brought to life super easily for this. You know, we obviously have the Sarasota Tech stuff that we can lean into a little bit. Anything related to tech wise. So yeah, I don't know. That's what we should start thinking about. And if we want to formalize any of those relationships too, there's opportunities to reach out, and you know, as long as we have a good plan, like we can go to anybody in town. Like I have good relationships with so many people that if we come up with a good plan, like it's highly likely that we can get it, you know, that we can execute.
And I guess maybe for me, it starts with understanding, like, I'd love to understand what all of you would want to do, like what it looks like for you to show up in one of these spaces, right? Like I'm thinking about, okay, like if you gave me 5 minutes, what would I tell you all about me and what I do and where I think I can contribute to a community? You know, I'm sure there's ways I don't even know I would contribute, but the things that automatically come to my mind, and I'd be curious about learning that about everybody here. Of, you know, when you think about it, what would that look like for you?
Yeah.
And how would you show up?
Yeah. What if that's it? What if their homework is next week, come back with like, what do you want to get out of this? You know, like if you're going to own a piece of something, you know, what do you want to get out of it, and what could you bring to it? And then maybe bring somebody else that like could be excited about the concept, or invite somebody else that might be excited about the concept. And because the other thing that I think about is if we do some big event, like those salons that we were doing, Tyler, there was pressure to like get high quality speakers to show up for that. And I think that's great. You know, I love the idea of an anchor to draw appeal, but you also just kind of want this to be for regular folks, you know? You know, you don't want low quality stuff. That's always the problem, right? And so like, but there's so many people in our networks that are talented that, you know, could do live music for this thing, or, you know, present a cool piece of art that they just made, or some short film they just did, or some song they just published, or whatever, you know, it'd be super cool. The first 20 minutes while people are networking, and then somebody comes on like, you guys were just listening to my new album, blah, blah, blah. And they perform a song. So like, for sure, those things are, and also like, could it just be some roundtable thing? Again, low production to start. We don't need a fancy space to do it. Yeah. What are you interested in? What do you want to contribute to the group? I told the story of Digital Stone Soup last week. Digital Stone Soup, you know, where everybody brought an ingredient, and then, you know, it wasn't long before the community's feasting. So like, what's your ingredient? You know? And I think maybe the first step is to highlight ourselves, right? And put up a little thing that says, hey, we're going to introduce ourselves. We're Tyler, we're Kat, we're Emily, we're, you know, Daniel, Jake, Colleen. And we have a little, you know, that's the first thing is like, and here's what we're doing. Sign up for updates. And we put a little, just the page up that's just that. And it says, you know, drop your email or drop your cell phone number, probably cell phone and email, whatever's easy. And yeah, and we start just want to highlight, want to profile, want to, you know, apply here, fill out this application to apply or to speak at our next event. And we just start grabbing people that, you know, can.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, because it's like we're the pieces of the puzzle as individuals. And then once you have those individual profiles of everyone, you can see how it fits together as a recipe or as a soup, like you said. Like, oh, these group of people should do this or could do this, or, you know, you'll see how these people will blend. And then you know what to do. When you know our abilities and our skill sets, it makes so much sense.
What if that's it? What if we're just going to map the most interesting people in Sarasota, and we just, you know, find a way to invite people in to come and tell us about like that, and we just find the quirkiest, most successful, the most artistic, the most talented, in whatever niche industry, right? It doesn't have to be like traditionally, you know, it's like this person over here is, I don't know, they're well known because they whoever puts those little doors all around town, those little stupid doors at the bottom of like, have you guys seen them? These little like painted doors that they put on like the bottom of a little storefront or the bottom of some like concrete pole or something to make it look like there's a little mini entrance for some elves or something at the bottom. Like,
Oh yeah.
yeah, there's somebody around town that just puts those things up. It's like, who are these people? You know, like there's all this circus community. There's all these like different quirky things about this place that's like major outside of here. People that work for big organizations, big companies, big enterprises that they just happen to be in Sarasota, you know? So like, and maybe that's it. We start with the profiles of each of us and we start figuring out how to just add more cool people to the mix. More ingredients to the pot.
I think it'd be a cool way if we could map out each person's strengths and show what kind of pieces that they need for their kind of soup that they're making, you know, their digital stone soup. And you could find a way to, you know, maybe source from the group like who might be a good match for that person, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that would be like, let's think about what we would want to map on this profile. It's like obviously their skills and what they're looking for, their talents.
Yeah.
So we'd want to have probably like some, and I said before, we don't want a directory, but we're talking about basically a directory of people. And maybe venues too. So like maybe the venues, you know, yeah, maybe it starts with people, but yeah, right. Like tags, right? Would it be tags? Would it be skills? Like, it'd be cool if like maybe you could plug in your LinkedIn and your Instagram and your YouTube or something like that to it, and it just kind of filled this stuff out automatically, and you didn't have to really like fill out a lot of stuff. You know, because that's the hard part about these types of things is like getting the data and making it all consistent. But that could also be part of the application process. So if people want to come present, they fill out their profile, and you know, it's like they want to have the profile filled out so that we can send people to that profile. That seems interesting. I like this idea. I like this thread we're pulling on. Show and tell for businesses with like some kind of directory for Sarasota's most interesting people or the region's most interesting people. And I don't even think that we should limit it to Sarasota, just because you know, like what happens when somebody from Miami, Daniel, that you land, or somebody from Tampa or St. Pete or something like that wants to come and share their stuff with us that, you know.
Yeah.
I say, and just as I say that, I think like, you know, the New York Times is interesting, not because it's about New York, you know, and so like it would be interesting to have something that's anchored with a little Sarasota brand, but it's not about Sarasota. It's just about like, you know, the people that make it special or the talent that's around or something like that. What's up, people watching on YouTube? I see you. Say hi in the comments. There's not a lot, but that's been interesting.
Just bring back Sarasota Underground.
I know. I keep thinking about that. Like, just bring back and turn it into a directory, right?
Yeah.
Most interesting people in Sarasota.
And then just take the image or the look of your TED, or sorry, not your TED Talk, your Sarasota Talks website, or sorry, Sarasota Tech website. How everyone is on the side there. Maybe people can just click, and like throughout the week, we could just upload what we want, like what we're building and what we're doing online. At least we can start like adding to our own profile on one website.
Yeah.
And maybe there's like a widget that makes it super simple. Like, oh, I want to add that to my profile. There's a widget on the side that people could download or whatever.
What types of things would you want to add? Like projects, like work, like your work stuff?
Yeah, like projects that I'm working on, right? Like, what am I doing? What am I building this week, but also this year? Like, what am I doing behind the scenes? And everyone can kind of keep track. Not keep track, but you know what I mean? Like, see what they want to see.
Yeah. The problem with that at a certain level, and I think it's a great idea, is that most people are not going to publish to that.
Well, I was thinking the widget, make it super simple, but you just got, you got to want to.
If you, the best thing to do would be to give folks an option to connect their Instagram or YouTube or wherever they publish and just have that stuff show up, because then, you know, you're for sure incentivized to keep publishing on Instagram. But if that happens to pull in and then we had an aggregate feed that was just like, here's Tyler and Kat and Emily, you know, here's the community feed of this thing or something like that, then we can kind of curate those things. But you're right, it has to kind of like folks are not going to come to this new platform to post. That's one thing I've learned over the years of trying to create these types of platforms.
Right.
But I like the baseline of just starting with a very simple people directory that we can expand on. So maybe that's what we do next. How about next week? First of all, think about what you could bring and what you might want to get out of this. And then think about like, what does it look like for us to kind of manage this? You know, like what features or what would you like to see? And I can start tinkering with a little something. Yeah, now my brain's ripping. But we're getting close to the scheduled time here, so I want to start winding it down. Any other thoughts relevant to this? I feel like this was a good conversation, and I think
Remember how you had that thought cloud mapped out with the way the internet was connecting the different ideas? I think that if you could design a similar thought cloud around the people that would be connected by the thought cloud and have connecting thoughts that are kind of similar in the same vein, if that makes sense. Do you remember what you were doing? It's kind of like a mind map or an internet map of how different things kind of related to the internet. It was really cool that you showed me. It was a data visualization thing, and I just think that if you had that around the people that are in your group, that it could map the data closest to the people doing something in the same lane that would be like your closest few people that you should be talking to about X are these people.
yeah, for sure. Showing like the relationships and making it easy for folks
Yeah.
to find other people they might want to connect with,
Sure.
especially surfacing
think that
that
would
in
be
like a
neat.
local place. Yeah.
Sure. I got some really cool stuff that I'm doing for work and business wise. I've got a lot that I could talk about, but we're winding down. But
Well,
we can save that for next week.
yeah, I think that's the bring it back next week. And like you and I have talked about this a handful of times too. Like we always were having these like social nights and partying and having fun together, but we never like spend any time thinking about like, hey, how do we do some business together? How do we like, do professional stuff together? Which, maybe this is it. We figure out how to like, and not saying we can't have fun and do parties and do other stuff also, but I think,
Yeah. We've grown.
yeah,
Let's make some money.
yeah, right. Like let's do something cool that like, plants a real flag in this town. And not just
Yeah.
in this town, like broader, right? Like let's do stuff that like, yeah, is interesting that other communities might want to mimic. Right? Like this type of stack, my desire for tinkering with software on the back of this is to find a solution not only to this problem, but I know lots of people have this problem. I've been beating my head against this problem for over a decade, thinking about like, how do you do this? How do you harness the attention of the crowd and like build infrastructure that supports it? So like, yeah, this is not an easy problem to solve here. But again, if we find a cool thing and we find a solution for this, there's lots of people that have this exact same problem that we could probably help. Okay. That seems like a good spot to cut the stream. Yeah, thanks for anybody who's been hanging with us live. Look at you, 3 folks watching live. We're rolling in it now, y'all. Those YouTube royalties are about to start raining in any day. No, to be honest, the reason I'm streaming these is because it's an easy way for me to record what happens. I get a transcript. I'm recording it on my device as well. And anybody who didn't make it can follow along. I think there's something cool about building this whole thing in public. So my goal is going to kind of be to just keep telling the story publicly. So I imagine that our planning meetings and the stuff that we do, if there's stuff that doesn't need to be, right, like if we're just doing strategic stuff, then obviously we won't stream that. But I think generally there's lots of folks that maybe wanted to be here but have family stuff or are working late or are playing at a gig or shooting a video, like whatever, that they might want to watch this thing later on, especially as we grow. And so trying to keep making that available for folks. And yeah, if you're watching and any of this resonated with you, feel free to reach out, leave a comment, and yeah, we'll see you next week. I'll drop the stream now. Bye, YouTube.